Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. Nothing beats a classic, and this moss stitch crochet sweater proves it. With its soft texture, relaxed fit, and ribbed finishes, it's the kind of piece you'll be reaching for again and again, whether if you're dressing it up or keeping it casual. If you're new here, welcome. I share modern crochet patterns and tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday, so tell a friend, tap the bell, and subscribe so you never miss an upload. And if you enjoy the video, give it a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to support the channel and help keep these tutorials free. So without further ado, let's make this timeless crochet sweater together. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 765 grams of yarn. That's 1,720 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and stick to the end of the video to hear about this week's pattern giveaway. We're using 2 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, and single crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting the sweater started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 6mm hook. Then we're all going to make an even number chain that reaches from the top of our shoulder down to our hips. I need roughly 18 inches or 46 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 64. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a single crochet row. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into the chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a single crochet. Let's do the next one together as well. Inserting your hook into that next chain, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through to get 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 2. From here, continue with 1 single crochet into every chain. Our first row is complete. Now we're going to get started on our second row, which is going to be a moss stitch row. So start by doing a chain 2. That first chain will count as our turning chain. That second chain will count as our first stitch for the following row. So go ahead and flip our work. Then from here, we're going to skip that first stitch and into the next, insert with our first single crochet. Now, doing that should give us the first 2 stitches for this row. That first is that chain space. The second is that single crochet. Again, we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. We should now have a total of 4 stitches for this row. Then once more, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. We aren't doing any increases or decreases, so we should end up with the same amount of stitches as chains that we made at the end of the row. We've made our way down with our row 2. Now this is going to be a 3-row repeat, and the third row is going to be yet another moss stitch row. So whenever we're starting a moss stitch row, like our previous row, we're going to start with a chain 2. That first chain will count as a turning chain. Second chain will count as our first stitch for the following row and flip our work. Then again, we're going to skip that first stitch and single crochet into the next. Again, leaving us with the first 2 stitches for this row. So that first is that chain space. Second is that single crochet. Then from here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until you reach the end of the row. Now just as a really quick tip, now that we're doing our second moss stitch row, our single crochets are always going to be worked into our previous row's chain space, and our chain space will be on top of the single crochets from our previous row. Again, we aren't doing any increases or decreases, so we should end up with the same amount of stitches as our previous row. So we have just completed our first 3 rows. Like I said, it is going to be a 3-row repeat. So just to get started on our following single crochet row, we're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and now just put 1 single crochet into every stitch and chain space to reach the end of the row, again ending with the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now all we're going to do from here is continue to repeat these 3 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid-underarm over to the side of the base of our neck. Now this is going to be where the width comes from, and I'll meet everyone back right after we have rows that is in multiples of 3 that ends on an odd number. We have just completed the width of our shoulder. I now have a total of 21 rows, which is just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here we're going to work on our neckline, which is fairly simple. all we're going to do is place this up to ourselves, making sure that the hook end is along the bottom and the top of our shoulder is still staying at the top of our shoulder. We're going to insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top that's 1 inch beneath the base of our neck. Now I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into the 14th stitch from the top. This width is just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Now, since we're along the bottom, we're going to do the following row in our row sequence, which should be a single crochet row for everyone. So we're going to chain 1, flip our work, single crochet all the way up until we're worked into the stitch right before a stitch marker, then I'll meet you back. So we've just made our way up with our first neckline row, which was just a single crochet row. Now from here, we're going to continue on with our 3-row repeat. So the following 2 rows will be moss stitch rows, then just repeat until we have a portion that can now work our way across our chest to the other side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet everyone back right after a single crochet row that ends along the top, because some will end along the bottom, but we want to make sure that we're ending along the top so then we can work straight into the shoulder together from there. We are back. I've just completed the width of my neckline. I now have a total of 40 rows. This width is just about 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to finish up with our other shoulder. So what we're going to do, since we all should have ended along the top, we're now going to make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 14 stitches. So from where we're at, I went ahead and made a chain 14. Then we're going to do the following row in a row sequence, which is a moss stitch row. So let's do that together. So once we have our chain, how we're going to do our moss stitch is start by blocking off that last chain. Then we're going to chain up 2. That first chain, just like the other rows, is going to count as our turning chain. Second chain will count as the first stitch for this following row. Then we're going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, 2, 3 is the one that we blocked off, and here is 4. Into that 4th chain, go ahead and insert with a single crochet. Now that should give us the first 2 stitches for this row, which is that chain space and then that single crochet. From here, we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and just continue on with our normal moss stitch, making our way all the way down. We've just completed our first shoulder row. As a quick tip, we should end up with the same amount of stitches as chains that we made when we got started on this piece. Then from here, we're just going to repeat our row repeat. So since this was our first moss stitch row, we're going to do a second moss stitch row, then our single crochet row, and then 2 moss stitch, 1 single, 2 moss stitch, 1 single, until we have the same amount of rows as this first shoulder portion. Once we do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet everyone back so we can get started on the back panel. The entirety of our front panel is finished. Now I have a total width of 16 inches or 41 centimeters. Now we are all done, so go ahead and do a chain up 1 and cut. Then we're going to do the back panel, which is done pretty much the same way as the front, minus the neck hole cutout. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So for the back panel, all we're going to do is make the same chain that we made for the front panel's shoulder, then just repeat our single crochet 2 moss stitch rows. Absolutely no increases, no decreases for the same amount of rows that we have for the front panel. Once we have that, do a chain up 1 and cut, then we can seam up the shoulders together. So once when both our front and our back panel are completed, we're going to place our front panel on top of our back panel and we're going to seam up the shoulders. So start by inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're going to do a single crochet seam. Now we're all going to put 1 single crochet in through every side row, working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. So start by finding our first side row within the front panel, find that top loop, insert. First side row within the back panel, find that top loop, insert, and single crochet. Pretty easy, let's do one more. Finding our next side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop, insert. Next side row within the back panel, find that top loop, insert, and single, and that's pretty much it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we have just completed seaming up our shoulders, now we're going to seam up our sides. So we're all going to start by making sure that our shoulders seam is still along the outside. Then we're going to try our piece on and insert our stitch marker into any stitch from the top for the width that we like for the sleeve to be. I'd like for my sleeve width to be just about 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters, so I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into the 24th stitch from the top. Then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to seam all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. We're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now we're going to do a single crochet seam. So finding our first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and we're going to single crochet everything together. Once more, next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single crochet everything together, and continue on with this until we reach our stitch marker. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we've just completed seaming up our sides. Now we're going to get started on our sleeve. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning both of our seams are now along the inside. We're then going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within the armhole. Then we're all going to start by making an even number chain the length that we'd like for the sleeve to be. So this could be as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like a full long sleeve. So I'm going to start by making a chain 60, and that's going to be just about 15 inches or 38 centimeters for me. So now that we have our chain, just like the body, we're going to start with a single crochet row. Start by blocking off that chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 is our turning chain. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with 1 single crochet into there. Then just continue with 1 single crochet into every chain until we reach the base. We've made our way down with our row 1. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base. Then we're going to slip stitch into there. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, which will be a moss stitch row, we're going to slip stitch into there, which still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now whenever we're along the base, working our way out towards the edge, doing a moss stitch row, we're always going to start with a chain 1. Then we're going to skip a stitch and single crochet into the next, so making sure that we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. We're going to find that first stitch from our previous row, skip that one, then single crochet into the next. Now that should give us the first 2 stitches of this row. That first is that chain space, second is that single, then continue with our moss stitch, so chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. We've made our way down with our row 2. Now we're going to do the third row in our row sequence, which is the same as the body, so another moss stitch row. So what we're going to do is chain 2 and flip. That first chain is our turning chain. That second chain will be the first stitch for our next row. Then all we're going to do is skip that first stitch into the next, insert with a single. So this is per usual. We're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until we reach the base. We made our way down with our third row. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we did our previous row. So just as a refresher, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. That slip stitch into the base does not count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up that following stitch into the base. Then repeat our 3-row repeat, making our way all the way up and around with no increases, no decreases. Now as a really quick tip, sometimes our single crochet row will start along the outer edge like how our first one did, or it'll start along the base like how our following one will, but no worries, that's just because we have an odd number of row repeats. But go ahead and just make your way all the way around, then I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into so we can seam it all together. So we've just made our way all the way around doing our sleeve rows. Now from here we're going to seam it all up, but this seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our sides, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So what we're all going to do is first make sure the work is flipped wrong side out, then do our same exact single crochet seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then we can start with our cuff together. Now that my seam is completed, we're going to start our cuff by making sure the work is flipped right side out, so now all the seams are along the inside again. We're all going to start by inserting our hook into any side row that's nearest to a single crochet row. Then we're going to start with a chain 1. Then what we're going to do is single crochet along the edge of our sleeve, and we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into the first 2 side rows, then into that third row in our 3-row repeat. We're going to skip that just to help it cinch up a little bit. So this is our first side row, should be a side single crochet row for everyone. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1. This is my next side row, which is a side moss stitch row. Find that top loop, insert with 1. Now my next side row, which is a moss stitch row, we are going to skip that one, then jump over to the next single crochet row with 1, into the next moss stitch row with just 1. Skip that next side row, into that next with 1, into that next with another. Skip that last moss stitch row, then continue to repeat this, making our way all the way around, then slip stitch into that chain space, then I'll meet you back. We have just completed our single crochet row and have slip stitched into that chain space. Now from here, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, and that's going to be a chain 12 for me. Once we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that we have done our chain 1, into the chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with our slip stitch. So that is our first one. Let's do the next one. Into that next chain, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Once more, into that next stitch, insert, gently pull through everything. We want to make sure that we're not tugging through too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. But just continue doing this, making our way all the way down our chain. We just made our way down with our slip stitch row. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just into that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert in through there with a slip stitch. So pretty much the same way that we connected our sleeve rows into the base. And that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work and now put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So just do the first one, making sure that we're not working in through any of those slip stitches into the base. We're going to insert into that first stitch's back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything. Once more, next stitch's back loop, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, just chain 1, flip our work, one back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We've just completed our first 3 rows. Now we're going to connect it into the base together once more. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch, still doesn't count as a stitch. Then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up that following stitch into the base, doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows with no increases, no decreases, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it together. So we have just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now from here we're just going to seam everything up together. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to yarn over, pull our working yarn through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. When you have all 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Once more, next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back, only into that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat everything we did here on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed both of our sleeves. Now from here, we're going to work on our neckline. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our shoulder seam, and we're going to do a single crochet row. But first, we're going to need to insert our stitch markers into our middle stitches that we have within the front and the back panel. It should be the same row within both. So all I did was found my first neckline row and my last neckline row, and just counted in 1 row at a time until I found my middle row. So for those of you that have my numbers, my middle row is in my 10th side row within the front and also 10th within the back. Then from here, we're just going to put 1 single crochet into every stitch, 1 single crochet into every side row. Then once we reach our middle rows, just make sure you're inserting a stitch marker into there within both the front and the back panel, just so we know where both of those are. Go ahead and make your way all the way around with a single crochet row, then do a chain up 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. But just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row will be as wide as this neck hole can stretch. So once it's completed, try our piece on. If it's a little too tight, we do some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, we do some stitches with a tighter grip. So we have just completed single crocheting along the entirety of our neckline. We did make sure to insert our stitch markers into the middle stitches that we have. Now from here, we're going to do our collar. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into the middle stitch that we have within the front panel. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. Then what we're going to do is pull our working yarn through and start with a chain 2. Now that we have chain 2, into that second chain from our hook, we're all going to start with an increase of 3 single crochets. So into the chain that's furthest from our hook, we're all going to insert with 1 single crochet, into that same with a second, into that same with a third single crochet. Then we're going to slip stitch it into the base. Now to make sure that we're not missing out on that stitch marker stitch, we're going to slip stitch it into that same stitch that our chain is worked into, or our stitch marker stitch. So go ahead and insert, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Now remember that the slip stitches into the base don't actually count as a stitch. Then we do need to work our way up to the following row, so working our way up the other side, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. Then we're going to flip our work. Now that we flipped our work, we're going to start with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last one. So since we're all working on row 2, we should all have 2 stitches to work into, then we're going to increase into our last. So making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to find that first stitch from our previous row, insert with 1 back loop slip, into that next stitch with another back loop slip, then we should have 1 stitch left, and into that last stitch, we're all going to do an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. So into that last back loop, we're going to insert with 2 single crochets. That was my first, this is my second. We're increasing with single crochets instead of slip stitches because the single crochets looks a lot cleaner and it's a lot easier to work into when we get into our following rows. So once we have that completed, at the end of our row 2, we should have a total of 4 stitches. We're then going to chain 2 and flip. Now to do this row, we're all going to slip stitch into that second chain from our hook's back loop. So insert in through that back loop. That first stitch will count as an increase for this row as well. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now at the end of our row 3, we should all have 5 stitches. Now our row 3 is completed. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and we're going to connect it into the base together once more. So into that next stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up that following stitch into the base. From here, it's going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows until we get the height of the collar that we're looking for. So I'm just going to do the following 2 rows together with you. So after we worked our way up to the following row, we're going to flip our work. Then, making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to start with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last one. Now we're at the end of our row 4. We all should have just done 4 back loop slip stitches. We should have 1 stitch left at the end of the row, and that is going to be an increase of 2 back loop single crochet. Then to get started on our odd number row, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. At the end of our row 4, we all should have had a total of 6 stitches. Then we're going to slip stitch into that second chain from our hook's back loop, then continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making our way all the way down. And since this is our row 5, we should all end with a total of 7 stitches for row 5. Our row 5 is completed. Now, just to connect it together, slip stitch it into that next stitch into the base, so that is per usual. From here, like I said, continue to repeat these 2 rows until we get the collar height that we would like. This is actually the height that I would like. So once we have the height, all I'm going to do is do our normal back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, the same way that we did our collar. So just to do that together, work our way up to the following row. Remember, none of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. Flip our work, make our way up with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now that row is completed, we're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and 1 back loop slip into every stitch. And for this portion, like I said, no additional increases or decreases, so we should have the same amount of stitches as our last increase row. We're going to continue doing this, working our way all the way around until we're worked into the stitch marker stitch that we have within the back. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, then I'll meet everyone back just to talk you guys through how to do the other side. So we've just made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We have worked into our stitch marker stitch, did a chain up of 1 and cut. Now from here, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just going to insert our hook into that front panel, stitch marker stitch again, then make our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you guys back so we can seam it up. So we have just completed the other side of our collar. Now, since we don't have any more stitches left to work into, we're going to go ahead and do our seam. Now, as you guys can see, I went ahead and already did my seam, but this seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our cuff. So just to talk you through it, making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam so we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up one and cut. Then we're just going to single crochet along the edge of our collar just to clean it up and to help round out this corner that we have right here. So this part is going to be pretty simple. We're going to make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Taking a look at the front panel. We're going to insert our hook into that middle stitch that both sides of our collar is coming out of. So we're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of one to secure. Then all we're going to do is just make our way all the way around, putting one single crochet into every side row. So finding our first side row, this is mine right here. It doesn't look like much, it kind of looks like a little nub, but we're just going to find that top loop and insert with one single crochet. Now is also the opportune time to weave in your ends as you go. So I'm just going to place all my tail ends over my hook and single crochet over everything. That is my first side row. This divot is my next side row, so I'm going to find that top loop and single crochet over that as well. And just to do one more set of rows, this raised row is my next side row, so I'm going to find that top loop, insert with one single crochet. This divot is my next side row, so I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just one. I'm going to continue on with this, making my way all the way around. And just as a quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch as well. So once when it's completed, try a piece on. If it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. Then I'll meet you back. So the single crochet row along the edge of the collar is completed. Now from here, we're going to get started on the bottom band. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to single crochet along the entirety of the bottom. This is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to be putting one single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around, kind of like the same way that we did the shoulder seam. So just make your way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, then I'll meet you back. And just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row will be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when it's completed, try a piece on. If it's a little too tight, we do some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, you do some stitches with a tighter grip. Then I'll meet you back. So our single crochet row along the bottom of our piece is completed. Now what we're going to do from here is back loop slip stitch rows exactly the same way that we did the cuff. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, all we're going to do is make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 18. Then just do our back loop slip stitch rows, no increases, no decreases, making our way all the way around. Then I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Our back loop slip stitch rows are completed. Now we are all done. The last thing we have to do is simply weave in all of our ends. And this seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as the cuffs and the collar. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up a one and cut. Then I'll meet you back. Everything is all seamed up and now we are all done. Last thing I have to do is simply weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us other hobbies you have other than crochet. I'm down for pretty much anything fiber related, but don't quite have the time right now, so right now I just have to say working out. Details for the giveaway down below. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!